in this community because we are such an amazing community. In the future, is there any way to avoid helpful tips, or even if I do encounter this, how can I gracefully and tactfully handle that and not burn bridges?
Coming out the gate with a head question.
Well, no one's answering.
It's difficult when you're walking into a new space, and just by your presence, having to be an ambassador for people of a similar life experience is a heavy burden to put on yourself. So know when you're in a place like that, all you can do is advocate for you. And if there is stuff that makes you uncomfortable going on, carefully and compassionately pull someone aside and say, hey, those are not the correct pronouns. I think you know that. You know, just do it in a very helpful way rather than a persecuting way. So all I can really say is do the best work that you can do and make sure that you are beyond reproach in that way. Because all of the respect comes after that, for sure. Even if folks don't necessarily get where you're coming from, they will absolutely respect you as an artist if you buckle down and do your work.
Thank you so much, and love the hair.
Thanks.
Hi. So in a job where you have to be constantly creating, how do you guys avoid burnout?
I'm still learning, still finding those things. I think you have to be really intentional about taking some time for yourself, right? The pandemic, I think, was super helpful in that it forced us all to take a break, and we should remember that and know that we are human, we are not machines, and we have to give ourselves rest and space and peace to reset. So whatever that means to you, whatever that stress reliever is, like set aside some time, whether it's between gigs or, a break on a tech day, just make a concentrated effort and be really intentional about your personal time and your reset time as much as you are about your creative time.
I think I, again, have a non-useful answer to this one. I am never happier than when I am pounding out a show and in the theater at 9 in the morning and there till midnight. And when I'm putting up a big Broadway musical, it's 3-4 weeks of load-in, 3-4 weeks of tech, 3-4 weeks of previews. 6, sometimes 7 days a week on a 12, 14-hour day schedule. And I honestly love it. I mean, you do need to take a break after that. And I guess I found that over time, the career kind of gives you those breaks too. What's tricky is when you hit a lull, when you're sort of quiet, accepting it and using it to relax and recharge and do whatever, and not just freaking out about, oh my God, I'm unemployed, what am I going to do? And I'm 53 years old and I still am not good at that sometimes. This winter I had quite a couple months and I freaked out and I called my agent and I said, I'm never going to work again. And he said, you have 3 Broadway shows next year, what are you talking about? Well, I'm not doing one right now. But I talked about love a little when I was talking about it. I love doing it so much. I feel so lucky every time I get to do an exciting show that I honestly don't ever want the time off. And sometimes I fall into some time off, and that's useful.
I personally think that I need to take the time off to recharge, because otherwise, if you're making stress decisions, that's not the right decision. You need to make the art decision. And for me, that has meant if I need to take some lull time and learn another skill or do something else that will pay the bills, like, do I need to make hats this month? Cool. I'm going to make hats this month and recharge and have pencils downtime at the end of the day. And then I can go back to the crazy design life where you have no free time and you're doing all of it all at once with great passion. So for me, there's got to be an ebb and a flow, and knowing that this too shall pass. whatever moment you're in, whatever stress you're dealing with in the moment, it's going to go away eventually.
Hello, this is a question for Eric as well. I'm also from Georgia, and I started my whole costuming process in cosplay, going to anime conventions. So I had a question for how would you make the transition from doing strictly cosplay into costuming for a more, I guess you would say, broad stage? Because when you're cosplaying, most of the time it's just for you, unless you're doing something that's commissioned for someone else. And I came up in the time where, I wasn't recording it, I wasn't taking pictures every step of the way, and now I'm getting to the point where I'm doing that. My workshop still isn't set up for it, so I still have a hard time showing people a portfolio when I've done so much stuff. So how would you go about trying to incorporate that now?
So I think there's two questions here. One is how to use the transferable skills between cosplay
Correct.
and industry, and the other is how to document your work.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to start with the first one. There are a lot of transferable skills, and in fact, especially in film and television, cosplayers that have their stuff available for immediate purchase are making bank, because film and TV doesn't have time to wait all
Right.
the time. So what I would say is if you really want to train with a shop, you got to get together some images of your work, some examples of your work, and go and apply to work in a costume shop. Often the skills that make cosplay really, really sing are crafts-oriented skills. So your foam carving, your leather working, your painting, your dyeing, all of those things. And that's a viable career path in the industry. So I would say pick a theater that's doing work that resonates with you, find out who's doing their looks, and try and get it in with them. I mean, the worst that can happen is an unanswered email or a no. And in terms of documenting the work, honestly, I like to use Instagram.
Okay.
Because it's quick, it's free, and you can just, boom, done, it's out in the world. And it's a quick portfolio. I personally, I have a website because we have to have websites, but it's tedious for me to do it.
Same.
I have a very short attention span, as you can tell, and I'm gone by the time that I've already clicked through one drop-down menu. I'm snoozing. So Instagram for me has been very helpful to show my body of work that is theater-based and not theater-based, because I do festival attire as well for commissions. That's one of the things in the lull times that I do to keep the bills paid. So I would do something like that, and you just have to be really, really diligent with documenting your process. And you can manufacture that process because you're making the art, right? So
Yep.
you can say, I'm going to do this project, and I'm going to document every little bit about it so that I can show it to people. So just be diligent with yourself.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank all of you for opening up your speeches beyond just your work. It's so helpful for the students to hear how you get ahead, how you can manage these things. And with that in mind, a lot of us here are dealing with shops that are university shops that are, sometimes at the Lord level, but we hear a lot about the relationships that our students have with the shops and the drama and the trauma. And I'm going to address this to Babel, but please, all of you feel, jump in if you like. But at the Broadway level, none of us here really know that relationship with the shops. And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how involved you are, what your responsibilities are, stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, at base, it is the same as any designer shop relationship. That it's a collaboration. I'm coming up with a set with my director, and then my assistant and I churn out drafting that goes to the shop. On a commercial show, we will churn out the drafting. And my assistants at this point know that we try to keep it to as few plates as possible, because the joke is that if it's 30 plates, it's going to cost more than the same set if it's 20 plates. But it's also, the graphic's got to be clear, and it's got to express what we're trying to do. And we do a bid session, in general, on a Broadway show. So, sometimes the budgets on Broadway shows are insane, millions of dollars. But we sit down, there are basically 6 shops that build Broadway scenery. And often we'll get in a room and I'll step through the model and we'll show them the drafting. They don't really care what the show is about, but they want to know what the pieces are and what the tricks they have to do and all of that. And then 2 weeks later, we'll start getting pricing back from them. And sometimes everybody's prices are the same, sometimes they're vastly different. Sometimes the shop I want is really busy, and so their price is more expensive because it's going to be a lot more overtime to build the set. Somebody else is not busy that month, and so I get a much better price from them. So that's how we pick which shop it's going to. Or often we end up splitting a set up, and it goes out to a bunch of different shops. I'm doing a show right now that it's outside of New York, but it's headed to Broadway in the future. And I think we've got 6 different shops building pieces of it, because we literally just went through and said, you can build this piece most cheaply, you can build this most cheaply, and so on. And so there have been days where I'm in the car driving 200 miles a day, hitting different shops around New York City, checking up on stuff. And that's where the collaboration part really comes in. The drawings, the technical drawings, they have to be clear, but they're fairly cut and dry. But the interpretation of that, and especially what the scenic painters do with that, is the artistic collaborative part of it. I want to go to a shop where I know the painters. At this point, I've been doing it long enough that I know all the places. I'm fairly comfortable with the staff. But sometimes on a specific project, I want a specific painter who can do something. I did a show called New York, New York on Broadway last season that had 13 fully painted drops in it. And I pulled a Ukrainian scenic artist who's painted for me for years. She'd actually retired and moved to Amsterdam. And I said, Irene, you've got to come back and paint the show for me, because she is voodoo. This woman can paint. So she didn't actually train she trained as an architect as a kid in Ukraine. And when she moved to the U.S., she sort of fell into scenic painting as a way to make money. And so she doesn't paint like most scenics that I know. And my running joke is I hand her a paint elevation, and she looks at it and tells me everything I did wrong and how she's going to fix it. and she does. But it is truly one of those kind of artistic relationships where we don't have to talk too much. And what she churns out looks like what I gave her, but a little bit better. And that's kind of collaboration at its best. When she puts something of herself in there, it takes my work and makes it better. And it's the same with props people. It's the same. Carpentry is slightly more cut and dry, but there's a bit of it there. I love a good TD. He's clever about how to do things when they're like, this is what you're trying to achieve. What if we do this instead of that? Those are my favorite shops. And if you listen to people and you hear their ideas, you're more likely to get a good result. So there's a lot of back and forth. I deal a lot with money and just what things cost. And the current commercial theater is in a tough spot right now. Broadway is not, for the most part, making money right now, but a lot of shows are happening. And I go to the shops and I see how strapped they are. Everything is sort of done on a kind of a just-in-time basis. Everything's being rushed. They are all tired. I did a long conversation yesterday, literally, up in Connecticut with a shop where my friend, who's the project manager, said, we feel like we can't say no to these things because the producer calls us up and says, you have to do this show for us. And we're like, we don't have time, we don't have the staff. And they say, you have to do it anyway. And so there's a push and pull there with the staff. But anyway, I talked a little bit how, as I started out, I was very hands-on with everything. And I have found that to be incredibly helpful. I'm not super hands-on with most shows anymore, and in fact, I'm designing things I wouldn't know how to build anymore. But the fact that I know the basis of how it works is super helpful when I'm talking to a carpenter. And just sort of respecting what your shop staff does, that people are people, treat everyone like people. Same with stagehands. In the Broadway world, it's a heavily unionized industry, and stagehands are a whole kind of different breed of stagehands than anywhere else in the world. And many of them are incredibly talented, but it is the same thing. It's treat people tell you how they think it might work. And then if it's not what you want for the design, have that conversation. The last time, I feel like I've been carrying on for a long time, I'm going to stop in a second. This is like a sort of fun Broadway technique I found. Technically, on a unionized show, I'm not allowed to touch anything. But I have a longtime associate named Alexis Tisler who's been with me for 13 years, and she's very charming, and she convinced stagehands to let us do whatever we want most of the time. But my version of that is I've taken to distressing sets with a baseball bat. And stagehands love to see a designer come in and start beating the crap out of a set with a baseball bat, and you'll see me all over Instagram doing that. And I have found it is like the key to letting me get my hands on my scenery, because I can't build it anymore, but I want to get my hands on it, and especially if it needs to be distressed or look old, I want to get some paint on it, I want to get in there and do it. And when I'm doing them, instead of do these sort of long load-in tech preview periods on Broadway, that's what I'm in there doing every morning for a few hours, is making the set look lived in, getting some paint on it, getting some dirt on it, getting some nicks and whatever in it, smashing the hell out of a trash can to make it look used. And because the IATSE Local 1 guys are amused by that, they let me do it. Anyway, I've talked too much.
I was going to piggyback off of this really quickly. From a lighting supervisor standpoint, the Alliance does at least one commercial show a year. So we work with basically everybody in New York. The whole design team, the cast, the crew is all in New York. And there is a boots on the ground person who directly interfaces with the shops on that side, and then they communicate with me, and we take care of what we need to on the Alliance side, so that when all of the scenery, all the lights come down to us, that we're ready to go. So my side of it on the Alliance, we typically handle like set electric things, and just like Beowulf was saying, sometimes the designers will have a specific shop in mind, but if they don't, then our technical director may shop some local places around town who can give us a better deal on something. So for the Preacher's Wife, which we're working on right now, there's 3 different shops building 3 different set electric components, very intricate, that we just don't have the time or labor to build in-house ourselves. Meanwhile, all of the lighting gear itself is getting prepped and ready to get on a truck in New York and come down to us for us to load in. So our relationship is a little bit different, but the designers definitely work with the shops. They have their favorites, and the associate tends to work typically with the production electrician, who's the one who kind of preps the show on the New York side.
And to round it up from a costume perspective, there's a lot of similarity. I mean, we have to spend our lives drawing and meeting, and I think life is a continuous stream of Zoom meetings and in-person flying to go have your meeting, get back on the plane, goodbye. There's a lot of that, but instead of drafting, we have to do technical drawings and piles of research naturally. And I love working with shops that build as much as they can in-house, because I just have a great joy for that. I married a technician. My wife is a draper. And she will absolutely look at my sketches on a show she's not working on and tell me how physics work. And I love that. And that's the joy of a great draper or technician, that they will tell you like it is. And as a designer, your job is to at least meet them halfway. Like, you want to do a really grandiose design, but you still have physical limitations. And sometimes the limitation is the joy of the thing. So I work in regional opera companies for the most part. And I gotta say, every place I've gone to, I've met at least one artist that I really clicked with. So I take them on my little circus train to Verity. So they will get a 4 a.m. email that says, "Hey, I'm doing Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you want to make some whisks for me?" Great. Yeah, and then they'll reply whenever it's convenient. But I try to get as many things made in-house as I can, but I have an extensive network of people that are my go-to trustworthy people that I know I don't need to hover. I need to let them apply their trade and artists that they are, and they're going to turn out something gorgeous.
Hey there, question for Eric. Outside of this, hey there. Outside from the script and, here's a podium there. Outside from the script and score, of course, what do you, as a costume designer, like to inspire your design?
I like a really good conversation with my team. So I don't bring a lot to the first meeting if we haven't talked about the show at all first. So I'd really love to have a great conversation with, at the very least, my director, so we can decide what kind of story we want to tell and what kind of art movement might work or anti-art movement, like what are we really trying to say with this? And so that's where I start, because it doesn't matter if we make pretty pictures, if it's not telling the right story, then it's useless.
Go.
This is a question for Eric as well, and we're just getting all the love today. I recently have the opportunity to design a show off-site, and I've never done that before, and it's kind of scary. So what are some tips? I'm a very hands-on person, and I like to touch everything and do everything, and not being in the room is scary. So what kind of tips do you have for designing the first off-site show?
So by offsite, do you mean like?
As in, they're in New York and I'm in Virginia.
Whew, okay, all right, that's tough.
Yeah.
Video chat as often as you can, and open every line of communication. I'm serious. People will think that they're bothering you because you're busy, and you are, but they're a crucial part of this. So make every avenue to accept a video call or see a text message, and don't be afraid to give like a gentle question. Like, I haven't seen how this has progressed, and I know that y'all been working, but snap me some pictures. I'd love to see what y'all are coming up with. And that way you can get in there and make it big, look at it on a big screen, because if you just look at it on your phone, you're going to miss something. Look at it on an iPad, look at it on a bigger screen, something that you can zoom in, something that you can draw on that says, scene line here instead of here. Get specific, be honest, and if you don't like something, be honest about it. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but be very upfront, because if you let little things slide because you're not there, under the caveat of, oh, I'll just fix it when I get there, it's not going to happen. Because you will have a deluge of things that are, I'm going to fix it when I get there, and then you're going to drown. So just take things bite size and be honest, and make sure that you've got a strong line of communication. Yeah.
Just so we know, everybody, we probably have time for 2 more questions.
Just like I had up earlier.
Hello, good evening. My question is for Rachel. So, with you being a female and an African American, do you feel like you have to work 10 times as harder as anybody else in the theater industry? And if so, do you have any advice for all my sisters out here?
I do. If I'm being completely honest, I do. That was one of the reasons, though, I chose to go to grad school. I knew I was going to have some trouble getting my foot in that door, and so just having those letters behind my name helped me out. Having the MFA, did help. And I'm not gonna lie, it's still kind of tricky. Hate to bring it back to the pandemic, but we had a lot of Black men lost in that time, and I think that also pushed theaters to want to raise up BIPOC designers across the board. And while a lot of theaters had solely lip service, there are some theaters out there actually doing the work and continuing to do that work. So
I am young and therefore scared of raising my voice. And I am not entirely certain where the line ends of where you can ask for things, where you can put your ideas out and say, I really feel like I want to interpret it this way, and when the director says, no, do it this way, I'm not sure where that line is, and I wanted to hear y'all's thoughts about that. Very broad question, I'm sorry.
Fortune favors the bold. So if you are in a situation where you're afraid to speak up, but you really have an idea and you really think that it's going to contribute to something, you got to just say it. You got to just say it. The worst they can do is shut you down. And I'm going to be honest, you're not always going to work with directors that you really jive with, but the more vocal that you can be and the more assured that you can be in your ideas, the more people that do jive with you will get you and start working with you. I work with an opera director whom I dearly love, and she's had a monolithic career, but she's intimidating. And the first time that I was in her office showing her work to try and get a job, terrifying. But the reason that she liked me was I made her laugh. I could speak on the pieces in an articulate way, and it didn't look like I was afraid of her. So try to think that you're on the same level, even if you're working with a different power dynamic with like a faculty member or something like that. In the space of art, try to come at it at the same level. So I think hopefully that'll do something for you.
I think what Eric just said is super important. You have to go in assuming you're equals in terms of having ideas. The director is in charge ultimately, and I feel like if I say it should be blue and the director says it should be pink, we're going to have a long discussion. But in the end, if the director says it should be pink, it's going to be pink. And I think theater only works when we kind of accept the director as a benevolent dictator. But I also am only interested in working with directors who want to hear my opinions. And if I work with somebody who's not really interested in my opinions, I don't want to work with them again because it's not interesting. And at best, what we're going to come up with is not something that you thought of and not something that the director thought of, but some hybrid that only came about because the two of you were talking. That's collaboration, and that's the magic of what we do. And the true magic is when it's, 100 people coming together making this thing that none of us would have made by ourselves. That's really the best magic of it. The last thing I'll say about, the director is absolutely my most important collaboration on a show, and the book that I wrote that I'm going to talk about tomorrow is very much about that relationship because it's what drives my entire process and everything I do. But it is also a little bit like dating. We've all had the experience of seeing someone who you think is attractive and you really want to be with them, and then you go on a date and you're like, oh, this is not good. And it's the same artistically. You can even admire someone's work and admire what they've done, but you just may not click artistically. You may not somehow speak the same language or whatever. And that happens and it's disappointing and you move on and maybe don't work with that person. It doesn't even mean it's a bad experience, it just means maybe what you're good at and what they're good at doesn't click in the right way. You're not making a great show together.
Yeah, just echoing exactly what they said. Collaboration is the name of the game. I don't think you can call yourself a theater practitioner if you don't know how to effectively collaborate. And while the director has the final say, I think there should always be a discussion. That's why you asked me to do this. That's why you brought me here in this capacity. We should talk through this. We should figure out what works, what serves the piece. But you really got to come in as a collaborator with an open mind, be flexible to all of the other voices in the room, and that's how you create some really powerful work.
All right, let's give our keynote speakers one more round of applause. And the conversation doesn't have to end here. Please don't all rush the stage at once as they're trying to leave, but I'm
you have any last questions, I know some of them will be sticking around. Remember, outside are the response lists for tomorrow's adjudication. A reminder that whether your name is on that list or not does not impact the placement in the design competition. But please come see the responses, see the work of your peers, and thank you all very much. Have a good night.